Hello everyone, my name is Kurnia. I am MBA student at IPMI International Business School. This video is made to fulfill the assignment of Dr. Jimmy Sadiri class Economics Managerial. For the minutes later, we are going to talk about intertemporal trade-off in macroeconomy. So enjoy the video. Edmund S. Phelps is an American professor of political economy at Columbia University. Phelps has PhD from Yale and won the 2006 Nobel Memorial Prize in Economics for his research on intertemporal trade-off in macroeconomic policy and the link between employment, wage setting, and inflation. First, we are going to talk about unemployment. The national unemployment rate is defined as the percentage of unemployed workers in the total labor force. When workers are unemployed, their families lose wages. The nation as a whole loses its contribution to the economy in terms of goods or services that could have been produced. Unemployed workers also lose their purchasing power, which can lead to unemployment for other workers, creating a cascading effect that ripple through the economy. And what about inflation? Inflation is defined as a sustained increase in the general level of prices for goods and services. It is measured as an annual percentage increase. As inflation rises, every dollar you own buys a smaller percentage of good or service. People like to complain about prices going up, but they often ignore the fact that the wages should be rising as well. The question shouldn't be whether inflation is rising, but whether it's rising at a quicker pace than your wages. Low inflation is the main macroeconomic goal for most developed economies. This is because there are many economic costs of high inflation. Costs of high inflation include reduced international competitiveness, confusion and uncertainty, and also boom and bust economic cycle. Government spending policies that influence macroeconomic condition. Through fiscal policy, regulator attempts to improve unemployment rates, control inflation, stabilize business cycle, and influence interest rates in an effort to control the economy. Monetary policy consists of the action of the central bank, currency board, or other regulatory committee that determine the size and the rate of growth of the money supply, which is in turn affect the interest rates. Monetary policy is maintained to the action such as modifying the interest rate, buying or selling government bonds, and changing the amount of money banks that are required to keep in vault or bank reserve. The relationship between inflation rates and unemployment rates is inverse. Graphically, this means the short-run Phillips curve is L-shaped. Phillips published his observation about the inverse correlation between wages changing and the employment in Great Britain in 1958. How fiscal and monetary policy resolve the conflict between the goals of low inflation and low unemployment? Current inflation depends not only on unemployment but also on inflation expectation. When wages and prices are adjusted, they are based on inflation forecasts. Higher the anticipated rate of inflation, higher the unemployment required to reach a certain actual inflation rate. In early post-war period, macroeconomics was dominated by Keynesian view on how the economy operates. There was no conflict between full employment and price stability, and simply keep the aggregate demand high enough to avoid under unemployment, but also not so high to lead inflation. Employment could be increased using aggregate demand policy. This would occur at cost of higher inflation. Philip Kurz him provide a menu of choice for policymakers between inflation and unemployment rate according to their preference. But there is critique on Philip Kurz. First, absence of convincing microeconomic foundation. It is a statistical correlation with rather tenuous theoretical underpinnings. And second, higher employment could be permanently achieved by allowing higher inflation, that in conflict with traditional presumption in economy, that in the long run, real magnitude in economy are determined by real rather than nominal forces. And the third, lack of any theory regarding the determinants of unemployment prevailing at full employment. Phelps has research from the end of 1960 that aimed at rectifying the theory of inflation and unemployment by explicitly modeling from wage and price setting behavior. Phelps research created expectation augmented belief curve. Real wages would adjust to make the supply of labor equal to the demand of labor, and the unemployment rate would then stand at the level uniquely associated with that real wage, the natural rate of unemployment. The government could not permanently trade higher inflation for lower unemployment. Imagine that unemployment is at natural rate. The real wage is constant. Workers who expect a given rate of price inflation insist that their wages increase at the same rate to prevent the erosion of their purchasing power. Imagine that the government uses expansionary monetary or fiscal policy in an attempt to lower unemployment below its natural rate. The resulting increase in demand encourages firms to raise their prices faster than workers had anticipated. With higher revenue, firms are willing to employ more workers at the old wage and even to raise those rates somewhat. For a short time, workers suffer from what economics call money illusion. Thus, the employment rates falls. They do not realize that their purchasing power has fallen because price has risen more rapidly than they expected. But over time, workers come to anticipate higher rates of price inflation. They supply less labor and insist on increases in wages that keep up with inflation. The real wage is restored to its old level, and the unemployment rates return to the natural rate. But the price inflation and wage inflation, brought on by expansionary policy, continue at the new higher rates. Pulp analysis provide a distinction between the short-run and long-run Phillips curve. So long as the average rate of inflation remains very constant, as it did in 1960s, inflation and unemployment will be inversely related. But if the average rate of inflation changes, as it will when policymakers persistently try to push unemployment below the natural rate, after a period of adjustment, unemployment rate will return to the natural rate. The original curve would then apply only to brief transitional periods that would shift with any persistent change in the average rate of inflation. This long-run and short-run relation can be combined with a single expectation augmented Philip curve. The more quickly workers' expectation of price inflation adapt to changes in the actual rate of inflation, the more quickly unemployment will return to the natural rate, and the less successful of government will be in reducing unemployment through monetary and fiscal policies. The 1960s provide striking confirmation of Friedman and Pop's fundamental point. Contrary to the original belief curve, when the average inflation rate rose from about 2.5% in the 1960s to about 7% in 1970s, the unemployment rate not only did not fall, it actually rose from about 4% to above 6%. There is some rate of unemployment that, if maintained, would be compatible with a stable rate of inflation. Many, however, call this the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment, or NAIRU, because unlike the term of natural rate, NAIRU does not suggest that an unemployment rate is socially optimal, unchanging, or impervious to policy. Expectation augmented belief curve is a fundamental element for almost every macroeconomic forecasting model now used by government and business. It is accepted by most otherwise diverse schools of macroeconomic thought. The early new classical theorists assumed that price adjusts freely and that expectation perform rationally, that is, without systematic error. This assumption implies that the belief curve would be very steep and that deviation from NAIRU should be short-lived. While sticking to the rational expectation hypothesis, even new classical economics now concede that wages and prices are somewhat sticky. Wage and price inertia resulting in the real wages that other relative prices away from their market clearing level. Explain the large fluctuation in unemployment around NAIRU and slow speed of convergence back to NAIRU. Thank you for watching my video. Hopefully, it will be useful for you and also for me. See you later. Bye-bye.